All right, welcome back to the Fuse Show, everybody. My name is Bud, and I'm Chief of Staff at Xfusion.io and co-host of the Fuse Show. I am excited to be joined today by my guest, James Layfield. James is the co-founder of Clearfind. He is a serial entrepreneur and investor. He loves to catalyze innovation and change the status quo positively and currently disrupting the way we manage software. James has a passion for many sectors, from property to financial technology. James, thank you for being on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Very, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure, buddy. It's my pleasure. So, you consider yourself a serial entrepreneur, and you have started something like 13 different businesses. Is that correct?
That is correct. If that's not the definition of serial, I don't know what is.
Right. And you have started all the way from SaaS to VC to FinTech to, you name it, you've started it. What landed you at Clearfind?
So the thing I've found is most of my business ideas come from a challenge that I face in the world. And Clearfind in that regard is no different. So for a number of years, I had a company that was helping one of the biggest banks in the world to drive innovation. And we started out in the UK, and then we expanded to Israel and India and Africa and Eastern Europe and America. And throughout that process, nearly about 10 years of work, we really got a good understanding of how this large, complicated, very well-funded entity in this bank engaged with new technology, how it looked at technology, how it evaluated technology, how it brought in new technology. And throughout that process, there was a massive piece of the puzzle missing. And to me, and to my co-founder, who interestingly also came from another bank, it was data. There has been, until Clearfind, a gigantic hole in the knowledge of people looking at software in any way, be it consolidations, bringing in new tools, whatever it might be, evaluation, which is, what does the tool do? What does it actually do? And so we set about solving that at scale, finding out all of the softwares around and all of the features they have, and making it accessible to our clients so that you can use that data to make some incredibly powerful business decisions really quickly.
Okay. And you kind of got fed up, I'm guessing, with trying to figure out who has what, who's doing what, who's wasting money on what software, and how can we just make this better? Because being a serial entrepreneur, you're like, I've used everything, I've wasted money on everything. How do I save money? What's the best tools that I have? How do I save money using the best tools? And, well, wait a second. How can I make money by helping people save money? Was that kind of your thought process? That's kind of what I'm guessing.
Somewhat, yeah. Somewhat. So working with the bank, it wasn't. The interesting thing is, our solution isn't just about saving money. It can help you save money because it can help you remove tools that are wasteful. But what it's really great for is to plan where you're going with your ecosystem, understand what you need, what your capabilities are, what you have, what you don't have, which is a very complex set of pieces of information. And as you have more and more software tools, they fit together in lots of different ways. And so our tool helps you understand how they fit together, if you need them all, helps you reallocate budget from the ones you don't need, helps tell you which ones you don't need, and makes it possible to sort of strategically have an overview and understand what is going on in the world of software for my company specifically.
Okay. So I had a quick look, because that's really all it takes is a quick look at your website. And tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm not the smartest guy when it comes to all this stuff, but really, you come in, you have the company tell you everything that they're using, and your company just says, okay, we can say you really just don't need this, and you just really just need this. And that's as simple as it is. Really, you're wasting money on these, and all you need is this.
Correct. If you think about it, it's a bit up until Clearfind, the only way to do this is to bring in a consulting firm or to try and do it yourself. So you might go to an Accenture or a Deloitte and bring them into your company and say, look, help us find the way forward, help us map a future for ourselves, help us move from this tool to this tool, help us understand that if we bring in this tool, what we can get rid of. With Clearfind, we can automate that whole process. So our system is so powerful and our data so unique and powerful that it can effectively make it possible for the company to understand this in real time on a go-forward basis without having to bring in lots of third parties.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, it says pretty clearly, I can help you save 30%, or you're paying about 30% more for software, and I can show you how to save that. I mean, that's a pretty bold claim. And it says I can do that quickly.
Yep.
And I believe that you can probably back that claim up. It's completely. Like I said, just visit the website, clearfind.com, and have a look. Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, very, very simple once you look at what they do. And you've got some pretty big name players that you're working with. Airbnb, Microsoft, Zoom, Slack. I mean, these are not slouches, and they trust you. I mean, why not give it a go? And
exactly.
Yeah, you guys, from what I can see, are the only ones that are doing, I mean, this specific type of work. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're right. We're the only company in the world that can do this right now.
Yeah,
and
good
so
for you.
It's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, awesome. Now, here's where I think things get pretty interesting. You were and still are, from what I can tell, a VC. I mean, that was part of some of your entrepreneurial stuff. You spent $3 million of your own money getting this thing going. Is that
more now? Yeah.
Okay? Is that because you just saw this as being a winner from the get-go? Is that because you didn't want to deal with the VC game? What was the reason behind it? Did you just want to get this thing up and going? Explain that to me. Like, did you just have this idea and say, I just want to get this thing going now?
It's a combination of things. So the first thing is just, I suppose, because it's an idea that hadn't been done before, and still to this day we're the only people that could do it, I wanted to be sure that we were on the right path and that we would get a fair valuation.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is, when you're entering into a new sector, it took us like 2.5 years to crack the problem. And sometimes external funding isn't always super patient.
Okay.
And therefore, you can end up having to take actions that aren't always aligned to the success metrics that you might have set for yourself. And I didn't want to have to face that challenge. The second thing was, once we started down the path, we started to play outside of the game. So we started to play in a little area, which is bootstrapped companies. And the more you play in that area, the more challenging it can be to swing back into the sort of the VC funding model. Because the VC funding model works in a very specific way, which is they're like a team with an idea, they put in some money, they take some equity, they get you to do some things, they put some more money in, they put more in, blah, blah, blah. And they take you on a journey where most of the time you're losing money hand over fist. That is the way it tends to work. And they are driving you towards an ideal, which should be, if you become the predominant global player in a space, at that point, hopefully, you will finally start to make money. And if you look at Amazon and you look at Uber, they all take that path, which is to spend insane amounts of cash to ultimately try and win a game, which could be unwinnable, but sometimes they win. And we haven't wanted necessarily to play in that space yet. We think there is a really exciting business here that is potentially very profitable, and it would be a shame to miss out on that opportunity because we're trying to follow a certain path, driven by our funding partners rather than the commercial realities of our environment.
All right. Well, very good. Now, I have to ask you this, and if you don't want to answer, that's fine. But I'm guessing it's from your previous entrepreneurial ventures. But most people don't just have $3 million to start a company. How were you able to get your $3 million to start to start this company? That's not a normal thing for people to be able to do. Like, again, good for you.
Well, the other thing is, but I think it's funny. I think the word entrepreneur can be synonymous with a lifestyle, an idea, and a sort of a way of doing things. To me, that's not necessarily what I mean when I say serial entrepreneur. To me, it is relatively important that the ventures that you sort of engage in make you money, and are in some degree, to some level, successful. And so you're correct that the funding for this has come from my other activities, and that they have in turn been successful, which has allowed me the ability to be able to invest in these ideas on my own. And I think, to me, sort of someone who's successful in business and someone who's a successful entrepreneur should start to create the liquidity to enable themselves to do things like this.
Huh. Well, I'm proud of you. I mean, good for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's something that not everybody has the ability to do, and it's not something that everybody has the cognition for. So, I mean, you're doing it, and that's something that
Thank you.
The people that are watching this, and the people that participate in this show, that's what they're trying to do. So, I mean, you're doing it.
Great.
So awesome. Now I'm also looking on your LinkedIn here, and when I prepare for these shows, I try and go over, everything that I can. That includes like volunteer experience and stuff like that. And a lot of people on their volunteer experience have, work with children, stuff like that. You are singularly focused. You have a lot of volunteer experience, but you are singularly focused on tech. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just blown away at your passion and your drive. So that leads me to, I've never heard of Cognition X, for example. There's a lot of things on there that I haven't heard of, but there's one thing that stands out to me with Cognition X. It's an incredible gathering of leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, policymakers, artists, academics, and activists addressing the question, how do we get the next 10 years right? What does that mean? What do you mean by how do we get the next 10 years right?
Well, the important thing to say is it's not my organization, obviously. I'm just one of the people who help them in their capacity to put on this phenomenal event that's typically in London, although it has been online as well, given the COVID situation. And a lot of it's about, predominantly about AI and understanding the role of AI in society and understanding the role of business in society. And so I think it's when you have a group of people who have that skill set, business, technology, and you can bring them together, they are going to shape and influence the way the world turns, especially in the West. And so getting the next 10 years right as a goal and having that as your audience should yield some really beautiful outcomes. And I think that is the purpose of that gathering, that the collective can come up with some smarter solutions that aren't going to destroy the planet and everyone's lives, but are also going to work in concert with the current systems that we have in place.
Nice. Yeah, that one I was just like, what in the world do they mean? I'm like, but no, that's very cool. but just kind of want to go back there with that singular focus and singular drive that you have. You obviously have a passion, not for just entrepreneurship and that, but just tech as a whole. I mean, fintech, what you're doing with Clearfind. I mean, just tech as a whole. How does that shape your life? I mean, do you wake up and go to bed just thinking about what the next step is in tech? Does your brain ever turn off? I mean, do you just wake up and just think, how am I going to change the world today, and what am I going to do for tomorrow?
Oh, but that's a beautiful question. I think the funny thing is, I've never thought of it in the way that you've just framed it. So I don't think of myself in the way that you just described me. And I would not think of myself particularly as someone who's massively into technology. I mean, in many ways, I am an early adopter of technology, and I am interested in technology. And as you see, and I see now hearing you read it back to me, the way that my personality online shows up, it would suggest a significant interest in technology. And that is true. But I think I'm more interested in solving problems than I am about the technology that sits within the solution. And so I definitely used to be in a place where I was always coming up with new ideas, and I was always buzzing with new ideas, and I was always very vibrant around that, and was, I suppose, maybe overly flexible in exploring possibilities. I think as I've got older, I've realized that actually clarity is something that I really value.
Okay.
Being thoughtful and clear, and trying to navigate my own thinking, and trying to pick apart what's a good idea and what's just noise, and trying to listen to the way I feel about something, and trying to sort of see the truth in an idea. And so I think as humans, we're really good at actually discerning quality ideas and quality thinking inherently, but we mostly ignore that. And so almost you'll see it sometimes. You'll go for a run, or you'll be out having a walk, or you'll be in the shower, and suddenly you'll have this really profoundly solid idea that maybe solves something you've been struggling with. And yet our society and the most of the way we work tends to suggest that hard work and thinking about things is the way to get to the answer. But our experience is that that's not necessarily the case, and that actually most great breakthroughs, eureka moments, even the ones that are sort of allegorical, are about someone got in a bath and had this amazing idea, or an apple fell on someone's head and they had an amazing idea. The moments when we have our best ideas aren't necessarily when we're in the thick of it. And so what I've learned to do is disrespect the busy thinking a lot more, and respect the clarity that comes from being more at peace. And so again, I used to be one of those people that I'd go to bed at night and I'd have like a notepad by my bed, and I'd be waking up with all these ideas. And I realized that actually that's not so productive. Although it's pretty good to get this stuff out of my head to some degree, if I can actually just settle myself and go to sleep and wake up refreshed, I'm much more useful to the world and to myself and to my businesses than I am when my brain is constantly ticking over and I'm always listening to and believing in the noise that's in my head that we call thinking.
Okay, so how do you get to that point where, because you have a lot of stuff going on, how do you get to the point where you can calm yourself? Like, I have 5 kids and they're all into sports or music, so I mean that's how I calm myself, right? I go to the ball field and watch them play ball, and that's kind of what clears my head and gets me kind of out of it. What gets you out of it? What is able to calm you down?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think everyone has, as you say, like techniques that they try and bring to bear to try and do this. But in a way, to my mind, it's about not heading in the direction of being sped up. And so we've all got our sort of cell phones, and our cell phones are constantly trying to stimulate us into doing things. And we've all got our computers and our televisions and what have you. And there is something in the idea that actually just disconnecting gives me the chance to settle down. Just sitting with a book, just sitting quietly, just actually getting bored. Getting bored is one of the most underrated things in the world. We run away from boredom like
Right.
you would not believe. It's like one of the most terrifying things anyone can do is be bored. And our entire economy, I think, to some degree, is predicated on the ability for people to avoid this concept of boredom. But if you really sit with something and just settle and let yourself get bored and don't run away from it, you pop out the other side of boredom into this beautiful space of clarity. And one place to experiment with this, if anyone wants to experiment with it, is if you're taking a flight across any parts of the US, if you're on a plane for an hour or two and you don't bring your laptop and you don't look at your phone, you just sit there and then you get bored and then you'll start to settle and suddenly you'll start to have these wonderful ideas because your brain has the space to do it. And you're not being disrupted. So I would say that, to be honest with you, the thing I'm looking to do is avoid stimulation. And the more I avoid that stimulation, the clearer I'm able to be. But like everyone, as I use my phone, I've got notifications, I get all this stuff, I get worked up, and I know it's taking me in the wrong direction, but at least knowing that, I can do something about it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try that. I have a flight coming up to Spokane on the 14th.
Great.
So I'm
Perfect.
gonna turn my phone off and I'm just gonna sit there and
sort of
hopefully I have a window seat and I'll just sit there and look out the window.
Well, even that's totally. Well, I had this most profound experience. It was really beautiful. I was on an American Airlines flight from New York to Seattle. And I don't know if you've been on their flights, but they have the most atrocious coffee in the world. And I had this lovely, horrendous American Airlines coffee in like a plastic cup with like a little plastic stirrer that when you stuck it in the coffee, it sort of melted a bit.
Right.
And I was sipping on it. And I'd just been really quiet for a while. And I had this idea, this really beautiful idea. And the idea was everything is as it should be. And it hit me as a very profound concept. That there was nothing but perfection in the world. That no matter what's happening, no matter how bad or good it looks, it is as it should be. And and there is a perfection there. And it was a really beautiful moment. And I think and to me, again, it validated this idea that when I settle down, I can see truth in a way that I don't always see. And it's really connected and profound when you do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to DM you on LinkedIn and let you know.
Do it.
Let you know what happens for sure.
Yes, please. This is a good social experiment. Listeners, do the same.
It is. I'm going to do that. I've never done that on a flight. I've always just played, a stupid game on my phone, I don't have my kids on this one, so I'm going to my best friend's son's wedding.
Go
and
through the boredom.
Boom. Yeah. I'm gonna give it a shot
and let it settle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Great.
Man, now I'm excited about that. Okay, now I gotta get trained. I've got to get back on. I gotta get back on track here. Okay. Well, my next question was going to be, what keeps you up at night? Because I figured that there was going to be stuff that keeps you up at night, but you kind of answered that question. And that was not a question I usually ask because I think it's kind of a silly question, but I figured there was stuff. I figured your brain was just going all the time, and there was stuff that kept you up. But you kind of answered that one already. So I'm gonna go to this one though. Are there any recent regrets that you have being an entrepreneur that started 13 different companies? You've been doing this for quite a while. Is there any recent regrets that you have? And if so, what are they and why?
That's a good question. Um, Regrets. I mean, there are always regrets, I think, in a sense, if you want there to be regrets. By which I mean, there are mistakes that you make in business often. And so it's a question of how you deal with those mistakes. And you can be regretful of them. That it would be logical to be regretful of them. Or you can think that's the nature of learning anything new, that you're going to make mistakes. And so I sort of tend towards that philosophy, which is sort of if you try and move through the world in a way that avoids mistakes, which therefore you could say avoids regrets, you're less likely to be as bold as you might be if if you don't care so much about those things. And so I suppose I would rather try and move through the world more boldly and make mistakes that one could then regret than worry too much about those things and have the idea of avoiding that be a major driver.
I like that. That's a good little snippet there. I mean, because that's like part of growing up, right? I mean, kids do stuff all the time where they make mistakes, but they don't really.
And you've got to.
Yeah,
I think
you have to.
Being an entrepreneur, you have to. And I think you'd be anyone listening to this, if they're on the journey and the thing they're trying to avoid is to not do that and not have these regrets, they're gonna torture themselves. We're not perfect. We do make mistakes. We do silly things. We do things we regret. But you can't let that shape you too much, especially not the avoidance of that, because being in business is a series of errors as well as successes that culminate in where you are today. I think it's very rare that anyone. And if you look, there's lots of great examples of businesses that started out doing one thing. Even Uber, when Uber started, they only did high-end cars. Didn't really work. They ended up having to do Uber X, and actually probably more people take Uber X than anything else. But when they first launched in the UK, you could only get like a Rolls Royce and all this nonsense that they don't even offer now. But it didn't work.
Right.
But do people think of Uber has been a success? Absolutely. Did they make loads of mistakes? Completely. It's just business.
Sure. Well, and Slack didn't start out being what Slack is.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think it's almost like flexibility would be the thing to take from this. I think flexibility, not holding on to something too tightly, which is one of our company values. Actually, don't hold on to your ideas too tightly. And enable that flexibility, because it's in that flexibility and also listening that you can navigate the complexity of running a business in the real world.
Nice. So that kind of leads, that's a great segue into this next question. What are some key takeaways that you've learned from your past experiences that apply to you now?
Definitely. This is great. So listening is one that I love. The reason I love listening is because everyone thinks that they listen and nobody listens at all. So the definition of listening to most people, and you can go on like workshops and how to listen, all this sort of stuff. And it's normally about either advanced note-taking techniques or advanced memory techniques. But what it very rarely, if ever, is about is just actually listening. And so when you listen, you're not also doing something else. But when we listen in society, we're always doing something else. We're thinking, I'm thinking about what to ask you next. I'm thinking about, I've got to remember that Bud said this so I can respond to that. Or I'm thinking, shit, what am I going to have for lunch? And actually, when's my lunch arriving? Or I'm just not listening. It looks like I'm listening. I think I'm listening, but I'm not listening. And so if instead you can settle down and actually listen, what I found that is really fascinating is the person will share things with you that the very things that you really want to know, and that you'll hear things, maybe not just in the words, that you could have never asked and got from the questions. you'll just know more about that person. You'll understand more about that person, and you'll hear what they're really trying to get at, even though their words may not completely convey it. So I find there's a beautiful clarity and understanding that can come from a very different approach to listening. The second thing, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, was this idea of not holding on to things too tightly. I think anyone who's on an entrepreneurial journey needs to understand that you're not building a train track that you have to run down these rails, especially in the early days. You're still working out, like, is it a train? Is it a car? Mm-hmm. Is it a scooter? What is it? Like, you want to go in that direction, sure, but how to get there, you have to be open to the possibility of change. And our business has evolved in many ways over the last few years, from being about finding new tools to being about saving you money to being about plotting a course for your software future. And so if we'd been too wedded to any one of those ideas, we wouldn't have the ability to flex when our customers are telling us that's not what I really want, or that's not how much I want to pay, or that doesn't really make sense. But what about this? And our best example, I think, we were talking to a big tech company, and they liked our product, our sort of search product, for a better word, but they weren't buying it. But they liked it, and they kept meeting with us, and they were talking about it. But in one of those meetings, they were the ones that said, hey, look, given you understand how these tools work at a feature level, why don't you tell us how the tools overlap at a feature level? And we just didn't hear them in the meeting. So we were not doing the very thing I'm trying to explain to you now. Right. And so we left that meeting, and we were like, well, why don't they keep buying it? And it wasn't until like a month or so later that we had the realization of what they'd actually told us. So then we went away and actually built the thing that they told us, and now they're buying it. So the information's around you if you're willing to have your head in the right space, and that you're not too wedded to forcing your idea on somebody. And so, yeah, I think they're the two really big ones. And I think also just trying to create a culture that people want to belong to, and that isn't just based on generic values that you make up to look cool or that are just supremely baseless, but you try and create a culture that people can buy into, and then you can bring talent in, you can recruit the right people, you can give people a sense of purpose, and actually create a really rewarding place to work that stands for something. And I think that's really important as well, that actually there is a reason to exist.
Yeah. Culture is huge for sure. And that's, we are 100% remote, and there's only 3 of us in the US. The rest of us are spread out, mostly in Kenya and the Philippines. And and culture is our big thing, and that falls directly on my shoulders as the chief of staff. And that is something that's, just a constant on my head is how do we create that culture? And it's hard because Kenya is different than the U.S. and the Philippines is different than Kenya and the U.S., So you have to navigate things so differently. No, but I get you there. Those are 3 very, very good things, and you kind of hit me in the heart there with that listen bit, because as you were saying that, I was trying to navigate my next question for you.
That's the way we operate. That's the way most people operate. It's normal, totally normal. Yeah,
so how did you start to really listen? Like, when did that really become a predominant feature for you? Was listening to listen and not listening to talk or listening to get your point across? When did that become a focus for you?
I think I became aware of that idea about 7 or 8 years ago. So I've been an entrepreneur for a long time in my mind. And I think I was the sort of entrepreneur that most people tend to be, which is very much so the things you've been describing almost throughout this call, but this idea of like someone who's very frenetic, who has lots of ideas, who maybe isn't getting loads of traction, so perhaps hasn't amassed any wealth as a consequence. And I think it's very easy to passionately pursue that and even be seen whilst doing that as a success. And so it's quite rewarding in many ways, even though you're not necessarily making the ground or making the traction you would make. And about 7 or 8 years ago, while I was running a co-working business at the time, I think, and also a marketing agency and a sales business. So I was doing 3 things at once. I came across this guy called Aaron Turner, who runs this wonderful business called One Thought. And at the time, a good friend of mine called Grant made an introduction to Aaron because he could see that I was struggling. And at the time, I didn't realize I was struggling in the sense that I could see I wasn't doing as well as I might do, but I was so sinking underneath the weight of my thinking and my busyness that I didn't really understand how badly I was coping. And so I went to meet this guy, Aaron, and he just helped me understand a paradigm shift, really, in the way that the world worked, and the way that you could perceive the world, and that how much of it happened inside my head. Which, when he explains it, is sort of all of it happens inside your head, that everything you perceive is only really happening inside your head. And a lovely little analogy might be, let's say you have 3 people. They all do the same exact job. 3 people, 3 similar people, all do the same job. And on the same day, they are all fired. 3 people are fired on the same day. One of them goes home to their partner and says, "Oh my God, I'm going to kill myself. I've had the crappiest week, the crappiest day, and guess what? Now I've been fired." Another one goes home to their partner and says, "Oh my God, let's go traveling. This is so exciting. Guess what? I've been fired." And another one goes home to their partner and just says, "I need to get a new job. Anyway, what's for dinner?" The 3 people had the exact same thing happen to them. The 3 reactions couldn't be more different.
Right.
And yet, if you were their partner and any one of them told you those things, you would appreciate their perspective and sympathize with them. Like, you wouldn't say to the person who feels depressed, "Oh, don't be stupid, go on holiday." You just wouldn't. And you wouldn't say to the person who's going on holiday, "Hang on, why are you not depressed about this?" And you wouldn't say to the person who's a bit blasé about it, "Good question, what's for dinner? No, you should be worried about this." You go along with it. Like, their internal narrative would carry them along and would bring everyone in for the ride, and it would just be reinforced. And it would seem normal. And weeks later, someone would say, "Well, why is James so depressed?" And say, "Oh, it's really sad. He lost his job the week." And then say weeks later, "Hey, why is James not around?" He goes, "Oh my God, he's gone traveling." And then say to the other guy, "Well, weeks later, I thought you used to work at that company, James, and now you work somewhere else." And you go, "Oh yeah, I got a new job." And those are the realities of the world we live in. And yet we don't appreciate that at all. We think, and it is because the person lost their job that ... that they're sad, that they're happy, that they're traveling. But it's not. It's because the person decided that's what they thought about it. And that is the only thing that matters. So when Aaron shared this with me, he didn't use my brilliant example. I've just made that one up for you. But
Well, thank you.
when he shared this with me, I just like, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense. And I started going back through my life and seeing moments in time where I had blamed this person, or I had blamed this situation, or I had said, "Well, it's because of this." And I thought, oh wow, I could have looked at it like that, or like that, or like that, or any number of infinite interpretations of that same moment. But I'd taken this stance, and I then followed the natural path that created. So it's not some sort of hokey, "Oh, you create your own reality." It's more like simplistic. It's like, look, dude, your way of reacting to stuff changes things. It's so obvious because, of course, it does. And when you can understand that, and you can then think, okay, well, how do I want to react to the fact I've just been fired? Do I want to be sad? Cool, be sad. Do I want to feel depressed? Great. That's cool too. Or do I want to feel happy? Or do I not care? And they're all as valid as each other. It's not that one's better or worse. They're all parts of the human condition. They're all part of the human experience. They're all incredibly valuable. And this isn't about, oh, everyone needs to be happy all the time. This is about understanding that we have complete freedom in our minds to choose any path, and to react in any way. And that freedom means that you don't have to take things so personally, because ultimately it's all down to the way you want to react to something. So it's really, that has been tremendous. And it allowed for all of these changes that have come afterwards about listening and about not holding on to it. It's just like, oh, wow, I'm getting more and more and more understanding. And that understanding is getting me better outcomes. I'm doing better in life.
I really like that, because it's, my daughter she's on the softball team. She just turned 16 yesterday. And she's going through some. Happy
birthday!
Yeah, thank you. I'll let her know. But she's going through some stuff with, there's, 16-year-old girl high school stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And she comes home and she's always just like, oh, this is just stupid. And so we're working with her on exactly what you're saying, right? Like, you can go and you can still cheer for everybody on the team, and you can choose to be a good teammate. Like, you don't have to like them off the field. That's fine with me. Like, but when you're a teammate, you still get to be a good teammate, and you still get to cheer for them, and you still get to have a good attitude. And we think that you should be on varsity, but if the coaches say no, then it's no. And you still get to have a good attitude, and you still get to go out there and do your very best and work your very hardest. And, it's all up to you and your hard work and your attitude. And lo and behold, she just got pulled off of JV and put on varsity, and it worked. And so I just
imagine the opposite would have been true, eh? If she had not done that, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And it would have been totally understandable that she didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a beautiful example. Yeah.
So, but now, it's easy for me to tell that to her. And it's easy for me because that's what my dad told to me, and that's the way I grew up. But then, when things are happening to me, it's a lot harder for me to put that into effect. It's a lot harder for me to see when it's happening to me, right? If somebody's not pointing it out. So, I obviously need some help to have somebody tell me, hey, but this one specific daughter is, she's a lot like me, and she's like, Dad, hello, like, this is exactly what you told me, so you need to do it too. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful for that, Totally. Where the other kids are just like, oh, Dad's mad, leave him alone. She's like, no. Like, this is what he tells us. We need to tell him, Yeah, I love it.
That's great.
I love it.
That's great.
So,
I totally agree. That's fantastic.
But yeah, it's so easy for me to tell my kids that and then not live it. So, nope, I completely agree. But, again, good on you for seeing it and living it and putting it into effect. We are 45 minutes into this thing already, and I can't believe it. Like, this time has absolutely flown.
It has. Yeah.
So let me ask you 3 more questions, and then we'll land this thing. So with all your experience and everything that you've had going on, put yourself back 10, 15 years. What advice would you give yourself 10, 15 years ago to help better yourself now? I think we've probably answered some of that in this, conversation already.
I think we have, yeah. I think to some degree we have, but I think it's also just, I think I lacked confidence in lots of ways. I think it's nice to be reassured that actually it's all okay and you're okay and it's all going to be fine. And I think you can prevent yourself doing lots of things because you get fearful. And so I think I always try to, but it can be hard. But just sort of say to myself, look, you are someone who could get a job. Worst case scenario, you could end up with a job. So you've got a nice little fallback position there, and that should give you the confidence to proceed. But I think if I could go back, that's one thing I would say to myself. I'd say, look, just go for it. Go for it way more than you've gone for it. Go for it. Yeah, with more confidence that you're going to be okay, I would say.
Nice. And then, again, I think we've answered some of these questions, but I always ask these last two questions. So if you want to add anything to it, what advice would you give to founders or soon-to-be founders that are going to watch this program?
So the first thing I would say is just like, why are you becoming a founder? Why is it you want to do this? Is it because you want to be rich? Is it because you've got a great idea? Understand a little bit about that. Like, what are your motivations? And then I think it's really understanding, like, does the world need the thing that you think they need? And why do you think that? So I suppose do some initial, like, MVP exists for a very good reason. So start out with as quick as you can and get testing stuff as fast as you can to see what people really think about the thing that you clearly think is an amazing idea. And don't be a perfectionist about it. Don't wait until it's finished to show people it. In a way, if you can go through all the criticism and bullshit that you're going to get on that journey and come out the other side, not because you're dogged, but because you have taken on the feedback and evolved, you're going to be in a much better place than you could possibly be than if you're working in your little silo and then you suddenly go, da-da, do you like it? So I think that is what I would say to people.
Nice. And then, final question, what is the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you if they so wish?
So I'd love you to reach out on LinkedIn. I am pretty active on LinkedIn, and I do get back to people. I always get back to people. And failing that, my email address is very simple. It's just james@clearfind.com. Happy to follow up on any of these questions. Happy to give any advice. Bearing in mind, it's just my opinion. That's all it is. If you've got questions about starting a business, happy to have a chat. But yeah, no, that's how I'd get in touch. So via LinkedIn, ideally, or via the email.
Right on. And then again, have a look at their website, which is simply clearfind.com. Very simple, but very intelligent way of doing things. James, thank you so much for being on the show. I did not know how this one was going to go, which way it would end up, and it did not end up the way that I thought it would. And I am very pleased about the way that this conversation went. This was awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show, and you have a really great day.
But thank you. Thank you very much.